What if everything you've been told about protecting your brain after 60 is incomplete? Not wrong exactly, just missing the most important part. You've heard about exercise. You've heard about sleep. You've probably heard your entire adult life that bananas are the gold standard for potassium, the mineral that keeps your heart steady and your muscles working. But here's the truth that most cardiologists, most nutritionists, and most wellness influencers never tell you. The banana is not even close to the top of the potassium list. Not even close. And the fruit that actually leads that list, a fruit that is sitting quietly in your grocery store right now, probably overlooked, probably underestimated, does something to the aging brain and the aging cardiovascular system that no banana on earth can replicate. Today, we are going to talk about that fruit. We are going to talk about the science of what it does at the cellular level. And we are going to talk about 6 specific research-backed insights that could genuinely change the trajectory of how your brain and body age from this point forward. Here's what most people over 60 are getting completely wrong. They believe that cognitive decline, stiffening arteries, chronic fatigue, and disrupted sleep are simply the price of getting older. They accept these things as inevitable. They manage them. They cope with them. But the emerging science, published not in obscure corners of the internet, but in journals like Neurology, Nature Aging, Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience, and Cell Metabolism, tells a dramatically different story. These journals, read by researchers at Harvard, Duke, the University of Copenhagen, and the Salk Institute, are now showing us that the trajectory of aging is far more malleable than we ever believed. That the foods you eat, specifically the bioactive compounds inside certain foods, can switch genes on and off, repair mitochondrial function, reduce neuroinflammation, and activate the brain's overnight cleaning system. These are not metaphors. These are documented, measurable biological processes. And the fruit at the center of today's conversation sits at the intersection of almost all of them. Before we go deep, let me tell you exactly what we are covering today, because I want you to stay with me through all of it. Each piece builds on the next, and by the end, you will have a complete protocol, not just a list of facts. First, we are going to look at why potassium is so much more critical after 60 than most doctors explain, and why the source of that potassium matters as much as the quantity. Second, we are going to meet the fruit itself, avocado, and understand why its nutritional profile is almost absurdly well matched to the aging brain. Third, we are going to explore what avocados do to the mitochondria, the tiny power generators inside every one of your cells, and why that matters for mental clarity and physical endurance. Fourth, we are going to talk about neuroinflammation, the slow, silent fire that drives Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and cognitive decline, and the specific compounds in this fruit that help put it out. Fifth, we are going to look at the gut-brain axis, a communication highway between your digestive system and your mind, and how the fiber and fat profile of avocado directly supports it. And sixth, we are going to connect all of this to the glymphatic system, the brain's remarkable overnight waste clearance network, and explain how what you eat before bed may be one of the most underappreciated factors in long-term brain health. But before any of that, if you are new here, welcome. This channel exists for one reason: to translate the most rigorous science in aging, neuroscience, and nutrition into something you can actually use. Not fear-based, not sensational, just evidence explained clearly with protocols you can follow starting today. If that sounds like what you need, please take a moment right now to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an update. And I want to ask you something. Drop your country in the comments below. Just your country. Every time we do this, people from 60, 70, sometimes over 100 different countries show up in that comment section, and I find it genuinely remarkable. This community spans the globe. So let us know where you are watching from, and let us get into the science. Let us start with potassium, because this mineral is doing something in your body that most people dramatically underestimate, and the story changes significantly once you pass 60. Potassium is an electrolyte, meaning it carries an electrical charge in solution, and your body uses it to regulate the electrical activity of your cells. Every heartbeat is orchestrated by a precise interplay between potassium and sodium. Every nerve signal traveling from your brain to your fingertips depends on what physiologists call the sodium-potassium pump, a molecular machine embedded in every cell membrane that actively shuttles 3 sodium ions out for every 2 potassium ions it pulls in. This creates the electrochemical gradient that makes your neurons fire, your muscles contract, and your heart beat rhythmically. Without adequate potassium, that pump becomes sluggish. Signals slow down, the heart's electrical rhythm becomes less stable. Blood vessels lose some of their ability to dilate, which raises blood pressure. Muscles, including the heart muscle, become more prone to cramping and irregular activity. Now here is where it gets specifically important for those of you over 60. As we age, the kidneys become less efficient at regulating potassium balance. Simultaneously, many older adults are on medications, diuretics, ACE inhibitors, certain blood pressure drugs that alter potassium handling in the body. And the standard American diet, heavily weighted toward processed foods, delivers an extraordinary amount of sodium while delivering very little potassium. The ideal sodium to potassium ratio in human physiology, the ratio our ancestors evolved with, is approximately 1:1. The average modern diet delivers a ratio closer to 3:1 in favor of sodium. This chronic imbalance has been linked in a 2021 study published in the European Heart Journal to higher rates of hypertension, increased stroke risk, and accelerated arterial stiffening, all conditions that are already elevated in adults over 60. So potassium is not a minor nutrient. It is foundational infrastructure. Now, the banana, a medium banana, contains approximately 422 milligrams of potassium. That is a decent amount, and for decades the banana has been the poster child for this mineral. But here's what rarely gets discussed. A single medium avocado contains approximately 975 milligrams of potassium. That is more than double. And a large avocado, the kind you find at most grocery stores, can deliver over 1,000 milligrams in a single sitting. To reach your daily adequate intake of 2,600 milligrams for women and 3,400 milligrams for men, as established by the National Academies of Sciences, you would need to eat 6 or 7 bananas. You could get to a substantial portion of that target with 1 avocado and a small salad. But potassium is honestly just the beginning, because the avocado is not a one-trick mineral source. It is one of the most nutrient-dense foods on Earth, and its real power, especially for the aging brain, lies in a combination of compounds that work together in ways researchers are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Let us talk about the fat, because this is where the avocado conversation often goes wrong. For decades, really from the 1960s all the way through the early 2000s, dietary fat was the villain in mainstream nutrition. We were told that fat caused heart disease, that fat made us fat, that fat was the enemy. We now know with considerable certainty that this was a dramatic oversimplification. The type of fat matters enormously, and avocados are composed predominantly of oleic acid, a monounsaturated omega-9 fatty acid that is the same primary fat found in olive oil and is one of the most extensively studied beneficial fats in human nutrition. A 2019 study in nutrients, conducted in collaboration with researchers at Tufts University, found that oleic acid consumption was associated with reduced LDL oxidation, meaning it helps prevent the kind of cholesterol damage that contributes to plaque formation in arteries. But beyond cardiovascular benefits, oleic acid does something in the brain that is particularly relevant to aging. The human brain is approximately 60% fat by dry weight. Much of its structural architecture depends on fatty acids. They form the membranes of neurons, regulate the fluidity of synaptic junctions where brain cells communicate, and influence the production of myelin, the insulating sheath around nerve fibers that allows electrical signals to travel at speed. As we age, myelin integrity can decline, and with it, the processing speed of the brain, the speed at which you recall words, make decisions, and shift attention. Research from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, published in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience in 2017, studied a group of healthy older adults between the ages of 50 and 82, and found that those who consumed 1 avocado per day for 6 months showed significant improvements in what the researchers called sustained attention and working memory performance. The investigators specifically linked these improvements to lutein, a carotenoid that accumulates in neural tissue, as well as to the fat-soluble delivery of that lutein facilitated by the avocado's monounsaturated fat content. Lutein, it turns out, is not just a pigment that protects your eyes, though it does do that remarkably well. It is an anti-inflammatory agent that concentrates in the macular region of the retina and in brain tissue, particularly the frontal lobe, where executive function and decision-making live. Now let us go deeper into the cellular machinery, because this is where the story gets genuinely extraordinary. Think of your mitochondria as the power generators inside every cell, tiny organelles, remnants of ancient bacteria that merged with our cells over 1 billion years ago, whose primary job is to convert the food you eat into ATP, the energy currency your body runs on. When you are young, mitochondria are efficient, resilient, and they divide and replace themselves readily in a process called mitochondrial biogenesis. But as we age, mitochondrial function declines. The generators become less efficient. They produce more toxic byproducts, specifically reactive oxygen species, which are essentially sparks flying off a poorly maintained engine, and they become slower to repair themselves. This mitochondrial dysfunction is now considered one of the hallmark drivers of aging across virtually every tissue in the body, but it is especially consequential in the brain, which is the most energetically demanding organ you have, consuming roughly 20% of your body's total energy, despite accounting for only about 2% of your body weight. Avocados contain a compound called beta-sitosterol, a plant sterol that has been shown in laboratory studies to have protective effects on mitochondrial membrane integrity. They also contain glutathione, one of the body's master antioxidants, produced primarily in the liver but found in meaningful concentrations in avocado flesh, and critically, in a form that appears to have reasonable bioavailability. Glutathione neutralizes the reactive oxygen species that damaged mitochondria produce, essentially cleaning up those sparks before they ignite larger fires of cellular damage. A 2020 review published in Antioxidants examined the relationship between dietary glutathione precursors, including those found in avocados, and age-related mitochondrial decline, and the authors concluded that food-based sources of glutathione and its precursor, compounds, represented a clinically meaningful strategy for attenuating oxidative stress in aging adults, an approach that complements rather than replaces the body's endogenous antioxidant systems. But here's where I want to spend some real time, because this mechanism is one of the most important and least discussed: neuroinflammation. If you have been following the neuroscience literature on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease over the last decade, you will know that the conversation has shifted dramatically away from the old amyloid-only hypothesis and toward a much more nuanced picture in which chronic, low-grade inflammation in the brain plays a central and possibly causal role. Neuroinflammation is not the same as the acute inflammation you experience when you sprain your ankle or fight off an infection. It is a slow, persistent, often symptom-free activation of the brain's immune cells, primarily the microglia, that gradually damages neurons, disrupts synaptic connections, and impairs the glymphatic system's ability to clear toxic proteins. Think of it as a pilot light that never turns off. Over years and decades, that pilot light scorches the surrounding tissue. What drives neuroinflammation? Multiple things: chronic stress, poor sleep, gut dysbiosis, excess visceral fat, exposure to environmental toxins. But diet is one of the most powerful and modifiable drivers. Diets high in ultra-processed foods, refined carbohydrates, and industrial seed oils consistently show up in the research as pro-inflammatory, activating pathways like NF-κB, nuclear factor kappa B, which is essentially the master switch for inflammatory gene expression in the brain. Avocados, by contrast, contain multiple compounds that work against this pathway. The oleic acid we already discussed has been shown to reduce NF-κB activation in microglial cells in studies from the University of Barcelona. The lutein and zeaxanthin in avocados reduce levels of TNF-alpha and IL-6, two key inflammatory signaling molecules that are chronically elevated in individuals with mild cognitive impairment. A 2021 study in the journal Nutrients, drawing on data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey involving over 4,000 participants, found that regular avocado consumers had significantly lower serum levels of inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein, and this association held even after controlling for overall diet quality, physical activity level, and body weight. The fiber story is equally important and far less appreciated. A medium avocado contains approximately 10 grams of dietary fiber, roughly a third of the daily target for adults. And this fiber is particularly interesting because it is predominantly a mix of insoluble cellulose and soluble fiber, including beta-glucan adjacent compounds that behave similarly to prebiotic fiber in the gut. Here is why this matters so profoundly for brain health. Your gut and your brain are in constant bidirectional communication through what researchers call the gut-brain axis, a network involving the vagus nerve, the enteric nervous system, microbial metabolites, and immune signaling. The 100 trillion microorganisms living in your gut, your microbiome, produce neurotransmitters, including approximately 90% of your body's total serotonin and significant quantities of GABA, the brain's primary calming neurotransmitter. They produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which crosses the blood-brain barrier and directly fuels the cells lining the brain's blood vessels, while also reducing neuroinflammation through its own set of anti-inflammatory mechanisms. When the gut microbiome is disrupted, a state called dysbiosis, which becomes increasingly common after 60 due to reduced gastric acid production, slowed intestinal motility, antibiotic exposure, and dietary shifts, the production of these beneficial compounds falls, and the production of inflammatory metabolites rises. The prebiotic fiber in avocados feeds beneficial bacteria, particularly species of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium that are associated with reduced anxiety, improved stress resilience, and slower cognitive decline. A 2021 randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Nutrition, conducted by researchers at the University of Illinois, randomly assigned participants to consume 1 avocado per day or a comparable calorie match control food for 12 weeks and measured changes in gut microbiome composition. The avocado group showed significantly greater microbial diversity, a key marker of gut health, and higher concentrations of butyrate-producing bacteria. Microbial diversity, it is worth emphasizing, is one of the strongest dietary predictors of healthy cognitive aging that we currently have in the literature. Now let us talk about the sixth insight, because this one ties everything together in a way that I find genuinely beautiful: the glymphatic system. Most people are familiar with the lymphatic system, the network of vessels that drains cellular waste and immune cells from tissues throughout the body. What was not discovered until 2013, when a landmark paper by Maiken Nedergaard and colleagues at the University of Rochester was published in Science, is that the brain has its own version of this system, and it operates almost exclusively during sleep. The glymphatic system uses the brain's cerebrospinal fluid as a kind of hydraulic cleaning solvent. During deep sleep, specifically slow-wave sleep, the brain's interstitial space expands by approximately 60%, and cerebrospinal fluid pulses through the tissue, flushing out toxic proteins including amyloid beta and tau, the very proteins that accumulate in the brains of Alzheimer's patients. Think of it as your brain running a dishwasher cycle every night, provided you get enough deep sleep to activate it. Here is the connection to avocados and to diet broadly. The glymphatic system's efficiency is profoundly influenced by sleep quality, and sleep quality is profoundly influenced by what you eat. The potassium in avocados supports the regulation of melatonin synthesis through its role in cellular membrane stability and enzymatic cofactor function. The magnesium in avocados, approximately 58 milligrams per fruit, directly influences GABA receptor activity, and GABA is the primary neurotransmitter that initiates the transition from waking consciousness into the deeper stages of sleep. A 2022 paper in Frontiers in Neuroscience reviewed the dietary predictors of glymphatic efficiency and specifically highlighted magnesium and omega-9 fatty acid intake as two of the most consistently associated dietary factors with improved slow-wave sleep architecture in older adults. Slow-wave sleep is precisely the stage during which the glymphatic system is most active. This is not a casual connection, it is a mechanistic one. The avocado, through its magnesium content, its monounsaturated fat profile, and its anti-inflammatory activity, may actually be helping you sleep more deeply, which in turn helps your brain clean itself more effectively overnight. Now let us talk about how these 6 mechanisms work together as a system, because this is the insight I most want you to take away today. Nutrition science has historically suffered from what I call the single nutrient fallacy, the tendency to isolate one compound, study it in a test tube or in isolation, and then announce a finding that almost never replicates cleanly in living humans eating real food. The reason is that nutrients do not work in isolation. They work in networks. They interact with each other, with our microbiome, with our hormones, with the timing of our meals and our sleep cycles. The avocado is a perfect illustration of this principle. Its potassium supports vascular health and neuronal electrical function. Its monounsaturated fat supports myelin integrity, lutein bioavailability, and cell membrane fluidity. Its lutein accumulates in the frontal lobe and reduces neuroinflammation. Its fiber feeds the microbiome that produces GABA and butyrate. Its magnesium facilitates deep sleep. Its glutathione protects mitochondrial function. And all of these mechanisms intersect and amplify each other. Better mitochondrial function supports better sleep. Better sleep supports a healthier microbiome. A healthier microbiome reduces neuroinflammation. Reduced neuroinflammation protects the neurons that regulate sleep, cognition, and mood. It is a virtuous cycle, and the avocado touches every spoke of that wheel. I want to address something here because I know it is on many of your minds. Hypertension and dear. I hear it in the comments constantly, and it is a completely legitimate concern. Avocados contain fat, and they are calorically dense. Half a medium avocado contains approximately 120 calories and 10 grams of fat. For someone who is watching their weight or managing blood sugar, this might feel like a red flag. So let me address this directly with the science, because the data here are actually quite reassuring. First, regarding blood glucose, the glycemic index of avocado is essentially 0. It contains virtually no net carbohydrates. Its small carbohydrate content is almost entirely offset by its fiber content, meaning it has a negligible impact on blood sugar or insulin levels. In fact, a 2019 study published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics found that adding half an avocado to a meal actually reduced post-meal insulin response compared to an equal calorie meal without avocado, likely because the fat and fiber combination slows gastric emptying and dampens the glycemic response of other foods in the meal. Second, regarding weight, multiple prospective studies, including a large analysis from the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study published in the Journal of the American Heart Association in 2022, found that higher avocado consumption was associated with lower risk of weight gain over time, not higher. The explanation the researchers offered was largely mechanical. The combination of fiber, fat, and a compound called beta-sitosterol promotes satiety signals, particularly through the hormone cholecystokinin, that reduce overall caloric intake across the day. People who eat avocados tend to feel fuller for longer and compensate by eating less later. So for those of you managing weight or blood sugar, the avocado is not a food to fear. It is one of the more strategically useful foods you can include. Now let me give you a practical protocol, because science without application is just trivia. For brain and cardiovascular benefit, the research suggests that approximately half to 1 full avocado per day is the effective range. The University of Illinois trial that showed microbiome improvements used 1 whole avocado daily for 12 weeks. The Tufts Cognitive Function Study used the same amount for 6 months. You do not need to eat it all at once. Half at breakfast and half at lunch is a perfectly reasonable approach and may actually be preferable for glycemic management. In terms of preparation, the fat-soluble compounds, lutein, beta-carotene, vitamin K, and fat-soluble antioxidants are best absorbed when consumed with a small amount of fat, which the avocado itself provides. However, adding avocado to a colorful vegetable salad dramatically increases the absorption of carotenoids from those vegetables as well. A 2005 study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which has been replicated multiple times since, found that adding avocado to a salad increase carotenoid absorption from the other vegetables by 3 to 15 times compared to a fat-free salad. This is a concept researchers call nutrient synergy. The avocado makes everything around it more bioavailable. For sleep optimization specifically, consuming your avocado portion in the late afternoon or early evening, approximately 3 to 4 hours before bed, allows the magnesium to peak in bioavailability during the hours when your body is beginning to wind down melatonin production and transitioning towards sleep onset. The oleic acid consumed in this window has been shown in circadian nutrition research from the Salk Institute to align well with the liver's peak fat processing activity, minimizing any digestive disruption during the nighttime hours. If you are adding avocado to an evening meal, pairing it with foods rich in tryptophan, the amino acid precursor to serotonin and melatonin, such as pumpkin seeds, turkey, or eggs, creates a nutrient combination that several researchers in the sleep science field have described as genuinely synergistic for sleep architecture. Before I close, I want to give you what I think of as the honorary mention in today's conversation, a food that pairs extraordinarily well with avocado and compounds the mechanisms we have been discussing. That food is pomegranate. I have covered pomegranate in depth on this channel before, but the reason it belongs in today's discussion is a compound called urolithin A. Pomegranate contains elagitannins, complex polyphenols that, when metabolized by specific strains of gut bacteria, are converted into urolithinophorethin, hankari, hypersay, cantronophory, sulfonophoresay, cancri, docri, common andriansan that has been shown in research published in Nature Metabolism to trigger a process called mitophagy, the selective removal and recycling of damaged mitochondria. Think of mitophagy as your cell's quality control system for its power generators. Urolithin A activates a cellular cleanup program that removes the old, inefficient mitochondria and makes way for new, healthier ones to be generated through biogenesis. A randomized controlled trial at the University of Washington, published in 2022, found that urolithin A supplementation improved mitochondrial function and muscle endurance in healthy older adults, and critically, the conversion of pomegranate elagitannins to urolithin A depends entirely on the gut microbiome, which means the avocado, by feeding and diversifying the microbiome, actually enhances your ability to extract this benefit from pomegranate. The two foods are not just complementary in flavor, they are mechanistically synergistic.